will be Carla, Caroline and myself presenting to you. So yeah, over to Carla.
Right, so I would like to start with some of the main points and overall to the article. So the main purpose of the article, we realize that is review the progress of understanding between human resource management and performance over the last 20 years by the explanation of research in the area in order to clarify possible lines for developing research that might provide an answer in the future. This analysis highlights the importance of considering the progress made on the subject from the initial concept to the contemporary and more sophisticated complex picture of human resource management. However, it also neglects that many areas of the potential research of human resource management and performance that are still amenable to a variety of quantitative, qualitative research methods. As a key question, we can see that all those studies have provided clear evidence of association between human resource management and performance rather than the causation of that. So even having that evidence, they are not enough to explain the key of the combination. So that study for human resource management and performance are cross-selections and quantitative in nature and contained in differing theoretical frameworks. While these studies provide us the colorful opposing findings and reach completing theoretical perspectives as contingency or universalities, this emerging field of human resource performance suffers for a lack of unity in theory and inconsistency in research methodology. So basically, this article suggests that some of the points to be further analyzed are, between others, the need for better theorizing about the implementation of the organization environment to the study, the likely site of human resource management impacts, and the appropriate control of the research models to provide alternative explanations. So we can see that, in other words, the problem, as the limited numbers of longitudinal study and the need for multiplicative source of information have been already detected, but there are still some basic methodological questions that remain unresolved, as for example, how to measure HR practice or HR implementations. Smith Johnson, it's claimed that we are more knowledge but not more wisdom and unable to demonstrate this relationship with any conviction. In many of the basic questions remain the same, and after 100 research, we are still in no position to assert with any confidence that good human resource management has an impact on organization performance. But to discuss it, we need to go for the main points and some more theory that Caroline is going to explain to you.
Okay. So the main points of this article is that we are still unable to answer core questions about the relationship between human resource management and performance. The guest talks about the researches which have been conducted regarding human resource management and performance. It is clear that there has been considerable progress on research between HRM and performance. Guest talks of different phases of research and theory regarding human resource management and performance. The beginnings, which is the first phase, and the development of theory and research on the association between HRM and performance. Several articles and books begin to link business strategy to human resource management. However, there were other viewpoints on this, such as Walton, who suggested that the organisational behaviour perspective had highlighted the need for a shift from control to commitment as the basis for management of people at work. Geston briefly speaks on empiricism, which was the second distinctive phase. This phase occurred in the 1990s, when the first set of survey-based statistical analysed studies of HRM and performance began to appear. Several theorists indicated that the adoption of more HR practices were associated with higher performance, and doing so began to provide an evidence base with a claim about a link. Following the second phase, there was a backlash and reflection, as they felt the rush to empiricism had occurred at the expense of sufficient consideration of some key conceptual issues, which was when the third phase emerged. Guest then talks of the fourth phase, which was focused on conceptual refinement. Guest had argued that we needed a better theory about HR practices, about outcomes, and about the link between them. He looked at the expectancy theory as a basis for determining core elements of HRM content and its link to performance. This approach was adopted in what has come to be known as the ability, motivation, opportunity model. This approach represents an essential universal perspective. A rather different approach emerged out of the theoretical work of Barney, who had presented the resource-based view of the firm. This has been developed and applied to HRM by others as a basis for focusing investment in human resources and predicting the types of investments most likely to result in superior performance and competitive advantage. The fifth phase in the development of research, which emerged in the past decade, concerns the key role workers and the importance of workers' perceptions and behaviour in understanding the relationship between HRM and performance. It is understood that the worker's voice has not been acknowledged in some of the early research, which provided to be an issue. Guest explains that there was a survey conducted in the UK which involves employees. The survey was a large national database which to study employee perceptions. Some of the initial results claim that HRM might not be in the workers' interests. The most recent phase is called Bringing the Worker Centre Stage. It is defined in terms of growing sophistication and complexity. It is considered more sophisticated because of the ability to carry out better research methods and theory.
So basically, coming to the conclusions of what Guest was actually trying to get to, after we actually have to go through it a few times to get to what he was getting to, but basically what we took out of it was that there's two main things that Guest focused on. Firstly, the way in which research is collected and how that is used to assess the impact of HRM on performance, and secondly, the way that processes affect HRM on performance. So with regards to the circumstances and the way in which research is collected, Guest's main point is that there's a need for research to move beyond simply reporting practices and actually finding out what those practices entail and making sure that it's not just a matter of purely collecting the data without understanding the context and the circumstances that they're in. He also mentions that there's a need to recognize the fact that there's a need for more careful formulation of research, so the actual things that we are researching need to be more specific, where he says at the moment there's a very wide scope, so there's a lot of stuff that we're assessing and we're not quite getting the quality of information on the areas that we should be. So he basically says that the refinement of the way that we research things is one of the main ways in which we will be able to improve our understanding of the link between HRM and performance. With regards to the processes, he makes note of the fact that very often in research on HRM impacting performance, the anticipation lag is neglected, which is basically the time that it takes from creating and deciding that you are going to put this process into place in your business for it to obviously bed, grow, and get to a full conclusion of being in the business for a set cycle. Now, if in the research the anticipation lag isn't taken into account, you could put a practice in place today, assess it in a week's time, but there obviously won't be any link between the two. Your information is totally irrelevant. So he comes back to us and says that multiple sources of information are required on HR practices as opposed to looking at just a certain area. He says it's also the effectiveness of the practices that we assess. So for instance, if you have an appraisal system at work, and that appraisal system's there, you can assess its impact on HRM, but if your appraisal system isn't fit for purpose, it's not the information that you gather on that performance is not valid. So the second thing that I assessed on Guest's work was the implications of his research. Basically, he said that with it being the way that we currently collect it not being what it should be, he suggested a number of ways in which we can improve the collecting of our research. He suggests that timeframes on which the research is based needs to be specific to the actual thing we are researching, because HR at the end of the day is a soft science. It's not hard numbers where you will see facts instantly. He also says that we need to identify the presence and implementation of HR practices. This was supported by the work of Wright and Nishi, 2006, and they actually highlighted, or he cites them in highlighting the need for differentiating between intended and implemented practices. He also raises the point that with research, one size does not fit all, because all organizations are different, and we all work for different companies, I'm sure we can tell that. The second thing is we also need to understand what motivates different areas of the workforce, because he sees the workforce as not one sole being, he sees different varieties within. So for instance, what his example was is with older members in the group, so people probably 5 or 10 years outside their pension would react differently to different benefits and reward schemes, as opposed to someone like us where we would be looking for study benefits or something similar would be more important to us now than maybe a higher retirement contribution. He says this is very important in assessing what that impact will have on performance. He also, well, basically the main point was it's not enough just having good practices, they need to be implemented correctly for them to actually take shape and give you an accurate picture of are they doing what they've been set out to do. With regards to the limitations of guesswork, I didn't have too much wrong with what he said, to be honest, but I mean, I think with regards to some of the points that he made, firstly on the last point that I made about different age groups responding differently, I understand that point, and I know he does back it up, but the reality is that in any workplace where there's a difference between employees, especially when it's something, so only when you get to the age of 60 are you applicable to this, becomes an issue. But just for instance, the bus strikes we had 2 weeks ago, that wasn't to do with rewards, but it was because 2 people doing the same job were receiving different benefits, and although there was a reason for that, the employees didn't see it like that. The employees saw it as, I'm not getting the same package as someone who does the same job as me on a day-to-day basis. So he didn't actually make light of the fact that there is this downside to that approach. I also thought he was a little bit vague about some of the cited evidence. He does mention that in the ever-increasing world of research that things are becoming more complex and that research methods are becoming more statistical statistics, basically. And he says that this excludes a number of researchers from the field, but the reality is that it's not about whether we're excluding researchers from the field as such, it's the quality of information that we're getting out. I mean, if we only have 10 researchers but they give us exactly what we're looking for, that's more important than having 100. So I mean, yeah, with regards to that, that was pretty much the main issues that I had with them. And there was one slide I'd like your opinion on this, Keith, if you can.
When are you going to use this?
Oh, that's a bit. Oh, wrong way around. Okay, that might help. So, okay, so all right. So when I was reading through the work a couple of times, I came across this line and it didn't quite sit right with me. So it says, in recent years, therefore, this neglect has been remedied. The context is irrelevant. In the UK, the inclusion of a survey of employees in the workplace, employment relations surveys of 1998 and 2004, provided a large national database with which to study workers' perceptions. Some initial interpretations of these results led to a claim that HRM might not be in the workers' best interests. Ramsey et al. 2000. Does anyone else see a slight issue there?
2004.
He's referencing something from 2000 based on research done in 2004. Now, for me, I don't know whether that's something you can do within your referencing, but for me, I don't think that you should be able to use someone else's opinion on work done before the research that you've cited. So that was probably the biggest error I had with his work. But yeah, other than that, that concludes our presentation for tonight. Pieces of paper in front of you aren't there just for fun, they actually are worth something. So I'm going to come around and grab them now, and I'll trade you. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it, have a good evening.
Ask some questions first. That's all right. Any questions?
Go easy on them, please.
I assume some of you have already
Do you have any questions, Keith?
Yes, you can imagine. You mentioned the fact that the research has shown an association between HRM and performance. An association as opposed to what?
Is it the cause? That's what they were struggling with. The,
Sorry, Caroline?
the association,
Yeah.
everyone could find that, but not the cause. That's what the issue
Right,
was.
a causal connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So there's some sort of relationship, a not
Between
very
the-
clearly defined relationship. But
Yeah,
there is an
I think that's what
association.
Guess was talking about. There's no,
Yeah.
despite all the theories and
All the research
research,
that's being done.
that they've not been able to find the causal
Yeah.
link.
I mean,
between the two.
why fundamentally do you think that is, in your own words? What, any of you can answer?
HR is and has always been a soft science, and the reality is that something that you put in place, like he mentions with the anticipation lag, that program might only be fully running, and you see the effects of it 2-3 years down the line.
Yeah.
So even once you've started the project,
Yeah.
you may have it running for a full year. The benefits and results of that may not be coming through the system yet. So the reality is that those certain things that you may be trying to assess won't actually give you the information on performance that you'd be looking for.
Yeah.
Well, that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's one problem, isn't it? It's the time it takes for these policies and practices to become embedded, and for them to actually impact on the way people work. Yeah, and it's difficult to actually take account of that time. And that's the argument for longitudinal research, isn't it? The problem with that is, of course, that's quite expensive longitudinal research. That's one of the reasons why that hasn't been done. Any other reasons?
I think one of the reasons is that you can't control for other variables. So in companies, lots of things happen at the same time. So where you might see a positive effect doesn't necessarily mean